Hi guys, I am still in Judges. We're in chapter 13. Um, so, concluding in chapter 12, we saw three judges who reigned over God's people between Jephthah and Samson. So, those were kind of like the big guys, and then we had these three guys in between, and their reigns were pretty uneventful because we're really not told anything about them other than they judged, they had children, and they died. That's all we're really told. And so what we're really not told is of any uprising, any rebellion, any catastrophe, any war, anything while these three were in charge. And so there was no real extraordinary deeds to speak of from these leaders, apparently. But notice there wasn't any catastrophic ones either. So there's something to be said for living in a peaceful, quiet type of a life, serving God, leading in obscurity, which I think these guys did from context clues there. But so we have those three. And then after them, and their names were Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, after they all three judged and died, the sad pattern of faithless rebellion against God returns in opening in Judges 13, verse 1. And it tells us that once again, God's people did evil against the Lord, did evil in the sight of the Lord. And of course, the result is that God gave them into the hands of their worst enemies, the Philistines, for 40 years. And so, this is the pattern that we see all throughout the book of Judges. God sends a judge, the people, are led well for a while, and then they rebel against God again, and consequences, right? Consequences for their disobedience. So, you think about this though. God gave them to their enemies so that they would be oppressed, they would be ruled over by pagans, by people who did not worship God, who did not love God. And so I'm sure they were cruel and harsh leaders, right? What kind of a father does that, you would ask? Some of us. And apparently, a God that wants obedience, a father that wants obedience, will allow his children to experience consequences for their wrong actions in order to bring them back to obedience, bring them back to protection and safety. And that's what we see over and over and over again throughout this book and really all of the Bible. And so perhaps in our culture, we Americans should think on that for quite a while. So anyway, God's people were again oppressed through their own actions, their own fault, and they were ruled over by foreign enemies. So enter new judge, right? We got to get a new judge. We got to get somebody to help us, to lead us out of this oppressive state under the Philistines. So in Judges chapter 13, we see a man introduced. His name is Manoah, from the tribe of Dan. And he had a wife who could not have children. So he had a barren wife. Not that uncommon, right? We still see that today. This woman was infertile. But the beginning of the chapter, we see the angel of the Lord appearing to this barren woman, approached by the angel of the Lord. And her experience is much like that unto Mary's when the angel came and promised that Jesus would be conceived in her womb. So the angel tells Manoah's wife that she would conceive and bear a son. She was given strict instructions to never cut his hair, never allow him to drink alcohol, and never eat anything unclean. Her promised child was to be a Nazarite from birth. And so if you look at Numbers, go back to Numbers chapter 6, verses 1 through 21, you will read about what a Nazarite vow entailed. So it was basically like a vow they took, and they had to follow these strict adherence, to these rules of, no alcohol, no strong drink, No unclean food. You can't cut your hair. So Paul actually took a Nazirite vow at one point, I think in Acts. I forget what chapter, but he took a vow as well. But anyway, it was something that people vowed to God, a Nazirite vow. So he was to be this from birth, which was unusual, which meant that his mother, while she was carrying him, neither could drink alcohol or unclean food or all of these things. So she also had to adhere, since it was from conception, his entire life he was to be under this vow. So anyway, the angel promised that her unborn son, who hasn't even conceived yet, would become the one responsible for beginning to free Israel from their enemies, their oppressive enemies, the Philistines. Okay? So this is amazing news, right? Imagine that. Like, one day you're infertile, you've been trying to have a baby all these years, you've given up, you've said, I'm never going to have my own children, and you've kind of just accepted that. And you're basically, you're enslaved by foreigners, so it's not, it's not a good time in your culture among your people. You're oppressed, right? So you're personally, you feel oppressed because you have no children, and culturally you're oppressed because you're under the hand of foreign enemies, okay, who are pagans. So that's your lot. But the next thing you know, this angel comes to you, this messenger from God, and says, you're going to have a kid, you're going to have a child, and he's going to start delivering you from your enemies. Now, that's great news. There's no better news than that for someone in that position, right? So the first thing this woman does after she receives this message is she runs to tell her husband, right? As any of us would probably do. We're going to tell the person closest to us what has just happened. And so she describes the angel and his message to her husband. And interestingly, neither the angel nor the woman's names are mentioned at all. In fact, later, and we don't get to it today, but later in the chapter, Manoah actually asks the angel what his name is, and the angel doesn't really tell him. But anyway, the main characters in the story, the woman and the angel, messenger of God, are unnamed. Something to consider, I thought, much like the three non-eventful judges who preceded the story at the end of chapter 12, which they were named, but just like them, who I mentioned earlier, often the most important actors in God's plan are some of the most obscure. And I think that message is coming through, at least for me, through the end of chapter 12 and into 13 here. So once the wife tells her husband the news, the first thing he does is pray. Lesson right there. Is prayer our first action when we hear good news, right? Well, this guy's was. So he goes to God. Manoah asks God to send his servant, the angel, send him back to teach him what to do with this child, right? So he doesn't disbelieve his wife's message. He's like, oh man, I'm about to have a kid. I've never had a child before, and now it's going to be this special child, and I don't know how to be a dad, and Lord help me. Like, send your angel back. Teach me what to do with this kid. Like, I don't know, as most of us are with our first child. We don't know what to do. We're just like, Lord help me here, right? But this guy, all the more, because, he's got this special child that's coming from God. So he's like, whoa, he's probably overwhelmed by this good news, though. And so he's under some pressure, I think. And so he goes straight to God. He's like, send your angel back. Tell me where I fit into this equation. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to be a good dad, basically, to this special warrior child. And do you know what God does? This is mind-blowing. I've been thinking about this, yesterday and today. This is crazy. He goes to God. He says, what do I do with this kid? How do I raise this kid? What's this kid's mission in life? And do you know what God does? He sends his angel back to Manoah's wife. Okay, the angel doesn't come to Manoah. He goes back to his wife again, right? Because he wasn't with his wife the first time. He wasn't with his wife the second time the angel comes. It's crazy, right? But God answers. He sends the angel back to his wife, and his wife runs to get him. She says, come on, come on, husband. The angel's back. He's out in the field where I was sitting. And how humbling that must have been, right, for Manoah, for this man to watch God's message come twice, not once, but twice, to his wife first, without coming to him at all. So imagine his surprise after praying and watching his wife run to him, saying that the angel had returned to her, right after his prayers. But you know what? Does it really matter? Does it really matter who gets to greet the messenger if it's an answer to our deepest prayers? Okay, so his deepest prayer was, what do I do with this child? Show me what to do with this child. So Manoah runs out to meet the angel of the Lord in the field where his wife had been. Manoah confirms the deity of the messenger first. He's like, are you this guy that said my wife's going to have a baby? Are you them? And you know what the angel says? The angel says, I am. Right? There's his name. I am. This is God. This is God's messenger coming to tell them what to do. So he asks what his unborn child's life mission is to be. What do I do with this kid? How do I raise this kid? How do I be a good dad? How do I steer his life to make him a great man? Like, I don't want to mess up. Tell me what to do. Just give me the instruction manual for this kid, right? He's wondering what to do, how to do it. This kid's going to be special. He's going to deliver the people, right? People Israel, God's people. Do you know what the angel tells him? This is too good. This is too good. How can people think the Bible is boring? It is too good. The angel says this, of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine, neither let her drink wine or strong drink or eat any unclean thing. All that I commanded her, let her observe. Judges 13:13 and 14. So Manoah's like, what do I do with this kid? Tell me how to raise him. And what does God say? What does his messenger say? See that woman you're married to? Help her. Help her. Help her. Don't let her drink the alcohol. Don't let her eat the unclean food. Make sure, your job, Manoah, is to make sure that she is able and willing to do everything that I've commanded her to do for this child. How do you like that? Does that remind you of anything? It reminds me of Adam and Eve, right? He gives Adam the primary responsibility, right? But, we can't just blame Eve for the sin, because it was Adam's primary responsibility to help that woman, to guide that woman, to lead that woman. And so that is what God's angel is telling Manoah in this instance. He's saying, lead your wife, help your wife, support your wife, help her to obey me. That's amazing. He doesn't say, Manoah, sharpen your skills with jousting, or teach him to be a warrior, or he doesn't tell Manoah anything personal other than support your wife, help your wife, keep her from wrong. Isn't that great? That's so great. Just like God, right? So, but when's the last time you asked God what you were supposed to do, how you were supposed to do it, and what it looked like? And he answered by telling you what your spouse is to do and what to help your spouse do and not do. And so I wonder, why would the angel give this man those kind of instructions for his wife? And, basically God says, offer some child support, right? By ensuring that help your wife not disobey the restrictions that she's been given with food and drink. And so, the only thing I can think is maybe this man liked to drink, right? Maybe he liked to eat unkosher food. Maybe his wife did. Maybe they both did. We're not really told, but we are told that she was forbidden to drink alcohol and eat unclean foods. And so my speculative guess, that it doesn't say this, but my guess is that one or both of them like to do just those things, right? we like to do things that maybe aren't so great for us and that we probably shouldn't do. And so when you're married and you're on a diet, it sure doesn't help when Pookie Bear is slamming Big Macs and cheesecake every day, right? God knows that. So he's like, Manoah, help her. Do you know what help her probably entailed? You don't do it either. Don't sit there and drink wine in front of this woman. Like, help her, right? Because it's going to be on you if she caves. And I really think that that was a lot of it. And I think, like anyone who's been married for any length of time realizes that this was certainly most likely not just a restriction for her, but for him as well. And maybe God didn't say that specifically, but maybe he shouldn't have to, right? The support and the encouragement of a spouse in a time of discipline and focus is paramount to our own success. And I think it's not mandatory. It's not like this must happen or you won't succeed. Because a lot of people, have a strong will and they can do it on their own without support of the spouse. However, how much easier, how much better does it make it when somebody's walking that path of discipline with you? God knows that. That's why he's saying that. Show me a man that stands behind his wife when she's working toward a familial or a personal goal even, and I will show you a man who succeeds in his own purposes and pursuits. And it works both ways. We support each other, and so that's what I see in this, and I think it's extremely practical. A lot of times I think people pick up the Bible, especially the Old Testament, which we're in, and they just say, I don't know what this is about, all these weird names and these weird people, and I don't know what's going on, and the context eludes me, and they give up, and they say, I don't really know, this Bible is not relevant to me. But, I think if you just read the story and consider that these were real people, just like you and me, it becomes very clear what God is really trying to communicate. And I think in this instance, he's trying to communicate that he shouldn't have to command a husband or a wife to support one another, right? And he doesn't do that here. He just says, help your wife, support your wife. And the wife was the one given the restrictions. And so, I don't know. I think that's something we should consider. I think it's a practical, helpful, everyday, modern application could be made from this very story. And so tomorrow we're going to see the departure of the angel of the Lord from this couple. And then a fun time starts because Samson is born. And who doesn't love a great Bible hero like Samson especially? I know I do. So thanks for listening. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you later.